Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, let us journey into a gentle tale beneath the silver moon. In a quiet, hidden garden, roses bloom only in the stillness of midnight. Their fragrance lingers softly in the air, while stars glimmer like lanterns above. Here, a lonely vampire walks in silence, carrying the weight of endless nights. Yet within this garden of shadows, something tender awaits a wandering soul, fragile and lost, seeking peace. This is not a story of fear or of sorrow, but of calm and quiet companionship, a tale where silence becomes a language, and even shadows can learn to rest in gentle light. As you listen, allow the words to guide you into stillness. Let the roses, the star, and the soft wind carry you toward dreams. Close your eyes now, breathe slowly, and drift with me into the Vampire of Midnight Garden, a dark bedtime story for peace, comfort, and deep, restful sleep. Midnight settled like a veil, soft, quiet, silver. The garden breathed under the moon. Roses opened in the cool air, each petal pale as frost, each edge glimmering with dew. The paths were narrow and curved, ribboning through beds of night-blooming flowers, past low hedges, and a small round pool that gathered starlight like a gentle bowl. The wind moved slowly, as if it too wished to rest. Leaves whispered, water made a hush. Everything felt peaceful, and the peace felt deep. He walked there as he always did, a figure of the soft, dark, tall, and still, with eyes that had learned the language of silence. The vampire did not fear the night. The night was his companion. The night was his shelter. He had lived long enough to watch marble crumble and ivy climb over old stone, long enough to see the same stars in new skies and the same moon in 1,000 phases. Yet here, in this quiet place, time loosened its grip. The garden made the hours gentle. His steps were light on the gravel. He did not hurry. He did not need to. He followed the scent of the roses, cool, faint, steady. Their fragrance was like a dream that did not fade, a promise of calm that held him softly. He paused beside a trellis where the vines had woven a silver arch, each blossom half awake beneath the moon. He lifted a hand but did not touch. He only watched the petals tremble in the mild wind, watched the dew gather and fall, watched the silver light move. The garden knew him. The hedges leaned in, the paths guided him. The little pool brightened when he drew near, as though the stars wished to greet him. He leaned over the water and saw his reflection loosen and reform, not a face to fear, but a soft shadow among other shadows, quiet and kind. He did not smile often. Tonight, he nearly did. Beyond the pool, the path curved toward a grove of slender willows. Their branches hung like veils, green and tender even at midnight, trailing their tips in the water's edge. He stepped beneath their soft curtain and felt the small touch of leaves against his cheek, like a blessing he could accept. The wind moved again. The branches swayed. The soft rustle sounded like a lullaby. He listened. He liked to listen. The garden sang in small ways. Gravel underfoot, water lapping gently, flower cups opening with a sigh, moths whispering their light wings above the blossoms. He heard it all, and in the hearing, he rested. No voice called his name. No footstep broke the pattern. Only the soft, silver night. Only the peaceful garden. Only the quiet that knew him well. He had planted some of it, long ago, when the world felt newer to his tired heart. Other parts had planted themselves, as if the moon had carried seeds in a hidden sleeve and scattered them while he slept. He did not mind which was which. He loved that the garden was both tended and free, shaped and wild, ordered and drifting. It was like the breath that lifts and falls without command. It was like a dream that chooses its own path, gentle and sure. He passed the stone bench that curved beneath a fig tree. He had sat there on colder nights, wrapped in the hush, watching the sky pale at the edges. He had watched frost lace the edges of the roses and then melt at the first quiet warmth. He had learned the names of the winds that visited, some smelling of distant rain, some smelling of the sea, some smelling of nothing at all but clean air and open space. He had learned to thank each one. In the far corner, a gate of old iron stood beneath a blooming arch. It did not open to a road. It opened to a thicket of sweetbriar and starflower, and then to a hill that rose like the back of a sleeping creature. He had not stepped beyond that gate for many nights. He did not feel trapped. He felt held. The garden was a circle of kindness. It asked for nothing. It gave what it could: silence, scent, silver light, and then grew still again. He paused by the fountain. It was small and round, carved with leaves and soft-winged birds. Water lifted and fell in a steady rhythm, like breathing, like a calm heart, like two words repeated forever: be still, be still. He closed his eyes and let that rhythm pass through him. In that rhythm, the centuries felt lighter. The great weight of memory loosened. The old ache of wandering eased. He stood there and let the silver sound smooth the edges of his thoughts. Sometimes he remembered faces, not clearly, only the light around them. A door opening, a candle shielded by a tender hand, a laugh that floated through a winter room like steam. He did not chase these memories. He let them drift past, like moths above the water, here and gone, delicate and harmless. He had learned that gentleness is not forgetting. Gentleness is holding without clutching. He tried to hold his life that way, softly, quietly, with care. The wind moved again and brought a new scent. Not sharp, not strange, only a hint of something like rain before rain. He lifted his head. He listened. The fountain breathed. The willows sighed. The roses opened another petal. The stars seemed bright enough to hum. He felt it then, the hush deepening, the silence thickening, like a soft blanket drawn a little closer. He walked toward the long bed of moonflowers. They were wide open now, white and round as little moons, each centered with a pale glow. He loved their patience, their soft persistence, the way they waited for night and bloomed when the world slept. He bent close and breathed their mild perfume. It felt cool in his chest. It felt peaceful. Across the path, a narrow stream slipped from a hidden spring and threaded through stones set like a careful necklace. He followed it with his eyes, watching the starlight shiver on the slow surface. Water carries the sky, he thought. Water carries dreams. He dipped his fingers. The chill was pleasant. He let the droplets fall back and become stars again. The garden paused with him, as if listening to his breath. He felt the pause inside his chest, a quiet place within the quiet place, a silver room with an open door. He did not name it. He only stood there and let it be. When he moved again, it was with the soft ease of someone who has been heard. He passed a low wall where moss made a velvet cushion and tiny white blossoms threaded the cracks. He touched the stone. The stone was cool. The moss was softer than sleep. He thought of lying down there and closing his eyes. He thought of the night watching over him like a tender host. Not yet, he told the thought, kind to it. Not yet, I will walk a little more. The stars had turned slightly. He noticed such things. The moon had climbed a finger, laying a brighter path along the pool. A moth drifted past his cheek, brushed him with a feather of air, then floated on, satisfied with its own quiet journey. Somewhere, far beyond the garden, a distant bell made a single note and stopped. The sound hung in the air and then dissolved. He lifted his gaze to the rose arbor at the center of the paths. The blooms there were fullest, as if the moon fed them with a private nectar. He moved beneath the arch and felt the silver scent settle over him like a blessing. He stopped. He listened again. The pause deepened, then gentled. then lifted like a soft breath released. He could not say why, but the night felt expectant, not urgent, never urgent here, only open, only ready, as if the garden itself had turned a page, and the new page was clean and bright and waiting for soft ink. He bowed his head to the roses, a small courtesy he had offered for so long that it had become part of his walk. Petals brushed his hair, dew cooled his forehead, the wind moved like a quiet hand through the leaves. The fountain breathed, the stream carried stars, the willows folded and unfolded their green veils. He did not speak. There was no need. The garden understood the silence he kept. The silence understood him. He stood within that understanding and let it steady him, the way a calm palm steadies a lantern. The flame did not flicker. The light stayed soft. The night stayed kind. When he turned, he did so gently, and the path ahead seemed softer than before. The moon rested on the stones like silver lace. The roses breathed. The water dreamed. His footsteps made a rhythm the garden knew by heart. Midnight held, quiet held, peace held, and in that holding, something tender stirred. Not yet a voice, not yet a shape, only a feeling like the faintest glow behind a veil, like the first star seen at the corner of the eye. He felt it and did not chase it. He let it draw near in its own time, as all gentle things prefer. He walked on, slow and calm, through the silver roses, under the patient moon, with the soft wind at his side. The garden waited with him. The night listened. The stars leaned close, and the pool, bright as a small sky, held its quiet light for whatever would come. The hours did not hurry. The garden still held its quiet breath, but within him, the centuries pressed on, as soft and heavy as velvet draped over his shoulders. He walked beneath the willows again, their green curtains swaying, their leaves brushing his hands with gentle strokes. The branches bent low, as if in sympathy, as if they knew the solitude he carried. He paused, resting his palm against the trunk of one tree. Its bark was cool, ridged with time, layered with stories it could not tell aloud. He thought of himself in that same way, layer upon layer, season upon season, each one resting in silence because there was no one left to hear. The vampire closed his eyes. He let the night breathe around him, slow and calm. The fountain whispered nearby, the sound of water falling, rising, falling again. Always the same, yet never the same. A and B at the fountain's voice. Even in repetition, it had a song. His own voice had long ago faded into disuse. Words had no need to be spoken when no one lingered to listen. He stepped away from the willow and let his gaze wander to the roses. They swayed in the soft wind, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Their petals, pale as snow yet alive with hidden warmth, seemed to lean toward him as if offering comfort. He remembered the first time he had seen such flowers bloom under the moon. Long ago, in another land, in another life. He remembered the hush of that night, and the joy that had touched him so deeply he thought it would last forever. Yet joy is as fleeting as dew on a petal. When the sun rises, it fades. When time stretches, it thins. He had learned this lesson 1,000 times over. The vampire walked slowly to the pool of starlight. He bent over it, his reflection steering in the faint ripples. A face, yes, but softened by shadow, softened by time. His eyes were pools themselves, deep, endless, carrying light but never warmth. He searched that reflection, as if hoping to glimpse a trace of something lost. The water gave back only what he already knew. A face shaped by solitude, kind yet weary, unchanged by seasons, untouched by the passing years. He dipped his hand into the pool. The water was cool, a little shiver of silver against his skin. Droplets fell from his fingertips, returning to the surface in widening circles. He watched the ripples spread, soft rings, carrying away the image of his face until it blurred and vanished. He wondered if loneliness could do the same, blur itself, vanish into the greater stillness, dissolve like circles in water, But loneliness clung tighter than ripples. It clung to bone, to breath, to thought. He straightened slowly. His cloak steered at his back, touched by the faintest current of wind. He let the cloak fall around him like a shroud of midnight. He had worn it so long it felt less like fabric and more like part of himself, a second skin woven from shadow. He moved down the path again, each step slow, each step sure, as though the stones were old friends. The stars above burned quietly. He lifted his gaze to them and felt the ache deepen. They were the same stars he had looked upon centuries ago, yet he knew the earth beneath had shifted. Kingdoms had risen and fallen, and the names of the constellations had changed on human tongues. Time passed for all else, but not for him. He remained, he endured, he carried the weight of endless night. Yet, in that weight, there was also a kind of peace. No storm of passion, no fear of endings, only the steady rhythm of midnight, the calm breathing of the garden, the eternal silver of the moon. Loneliness was heavy, but it was also soft. It wrapped him gently, as one wraps in a blanket. It was not cruel, it was simply there. He reached the stone bench again and lowered himself onto it. The stone was cold, but he did not mind. He sat with his hands folded in his lap, listening to the garden sing its subtle lullabies. Trickle of the fountain, the faint rustle of rose leaves, the whisper of wind over the surface of the pool. It was enough. It was what the night always gave him. Sometimes he dreamed while waking. The dreams came quietly, like veils, drifting across his thoughts. He would imagine voices on the wind, laughter hidden in the rustle of branches, footsteps trailing just beyond the gate. He never chased them. He let them appear and vanish, like mist curling and uncurled by down. Perhaps they were memories. Perhaps they were only the night speaking to itself. Tonight, as he dreamed in stillness, he remembered a hand soft, warm, holding his once long ago. He could not recall the face, only the feeling. To be known, to be seen, to not be alone. He let the memory rest on him, like moonlight resting on stone. It did not wound him. It did not heal him. It only reminded him that once, before the centuries pressed down, he had shared the night with another soul. The fountain sighed. The wind folded over itself. A moth circled near the roses and then drifted away. The vampire closed his eyes again, breathing in, breathing out, slowly, softly. He did not resist the weight of endless night. He accepted it. He wore it as he wore the cloak, as he wore the centuries. For in acceptance, there was calm. In calm was peace. The hours slipped further toward dawn, though he did not measure them. He knew only the silver hush around him, the quiet that pressed close, yet never smothered. He let it cradle him. He let it carry him. His solitude was heavy, yes, but it was steady. And in that steadiness, he could rest. He lifted his gaze once more to the stars. They seemed nearer now, leaning close, as if listening. It did not speak. He only let his silence meet theirs, a silent conversation between an immortal soul and eternal light. The stars twinkled softly. The garden breathed softly. The night held softly. And he sat there, cloaked in centuries, wrapped in silence, with the weight of endless night upon him, soft, steady, unbroken. The night held as it always did, calm and silver, wrapping the garden in its quiet arms. The vampire moved from the stone bench and wandered along the winding paths once more, his steps soft upon the gravel. Nothing had changed, and yet something in the air felt slightly different, as though the stillness had leaned closer, listening more intently. The roses opened wider as midnight deepened, their pale petals trembling under the gentle weight of dew. Their fragrance floated softly through the air, sweet but delicate, never heavy, never sharp. He let the scent ease into him, filling the hollow places where memory sometimes echoed. The fountain breathed steadily, water rising and falling, its rhythm unchanged. And yet, he paused. Somewhere, among the shadows, there was another presence, not harsh, not sudden, only a glow, faint as a star behind a veil of mist. He turned his gaze toward the far corner of the garden, where the old iron gate stood beneath the arch of roses. At first, he thought it a trick of moonlight, a star caught among the branches, but stars did not move so gently. Stars did not float closer, shimmering like breath against a mirror. He remained very still. Stillness had always been his strength. He knew that to chase what was delicate was to frighten it away, so he stood as though he were only another tree in the garden, waiting, listening, watching. The glow grew clearer. It drifted softly through the arch, hesitating as though it, too, feared to disturb the garden's peace. It was not a flame, nor a wandering lantern. It was a figure, slender, fragile, and translucent as morning mist. A soul, wandering and lost, caught between the worlds of living and resting. Its light flickered gently, like moonlight upon rippled water, never harsh, never blinding. The vampire lowered his gaze slightly, a gesture of quiet welcome. He did not speak. Words could shatter the delicate moment. Silence was safer. Silence was softer. The spirit paused at the edge of the path. Its form wavered, as if uncertain whether to remain or to vanish back into the unseen. He could sense its trembling, though it made no sound. The roses swayed gently toward it, as though beckoning it closer, as though the garden itself had opened its arms to this lost visitor. The vampire stepped back from the path, giving space, a gesture of kindness without demand. He wanted the spirit to know that it was not trapped, not bound, not in danger here, only welcomed, only seen. The glow moved closer, drifting past the roses, past the trellis where silver blossoms curled. With each step, it became clearer. A shape of a face began to form, soft and indistinct, eyes like faint stars, lips barely suggested. It was not whole, and yet it was not empty. It was enough to carry presence, enough to carry sorrow. The vampire's heart stirred, a small motion within his endless stillness. He felt the ache of the centuries soften. This was no ordinary wanderer. This was a soul caught between silence and silence, searching for a place to rest. The garden seemed to hush further. The fountain quieted, its song softer now. The wind stilled, holding its breath. Even the moths seemed to pause their flight, wings folded in reverence. The night itself honored this moment, the meeting of shadow and light, of stillness and lostness. The spirit's gaze lifted toward him, though its eyes were no more than faint glimmers. For the first time in many nights, perhaps in many lifetimes, he felt seen, not with fear, not with judgment, simply seen. He inclined his head, slow and graceful, a greeting without sound, a blessing without words. The spirit flickered, its glow trembling like a candle flame touched by a sigh. Yet it did not vanish. It remained. And so they stood, vampire and soul, in the quiet heart of the garden, beneath the silver moon, surrounded by roses that seemed to hold their breath. No words passed between them, but silence became a language, the kind of language that does not demand, does not wound, does not fade. The vampire felt something within him ease, as though the endless night had lifted slightly from his shoulders. This presence was fragile, yes, but it was also a gift. He did not wonder why it had come. He did not question what it sought. He only let it be. The spirit drifted closer still, until the faint glow brushed against the roses, making their petals shine brighter, as though bathed in starlight. It lingered near him, no longer trembling, as though it had found, if not a home, then at least a place of rest. The vampire closed his eyes for a moment. He breathed the fragrance of the roses, the hush of the night, the faint shimmer of the spirit's light, and he knew that solitude had shifted. It had not vanished, but it had softened. In the stillness of the midnight garden, something new had begun. The fountain sighed again, gentle and calm. The willows swayed, their branches offering shelter. The stars glimmered above, steady and kind. The garden accepted this new guest as it had accepted him long ago, with patience, with quiet, with peace. The vampire opened his eyes and met the glow once more. No words, no sound, only the unspoken promise that neither of them was alone in this silver hour. And in that promise, the garden itself seemed to bloom a little brighter. The garden breathed with them. The roses opened wider, the fountain whispered softer, and the moon hung above like a watchful lantern. In its silver glow, the vampire and the spirit stood together, neither moving quickly, neither wishing to disturb the fragile stillness that had unfolded between them. The vampire lowered his gaze once more, his gesture quiet and deliberate. He had learned, over centuries, that gentleness is not weakness, but invitation. And so he offered gentleness now, not with words, but with presence. His stillness was his gift. His patience was his greeting. The spirit drifted closer, its glow trembling faintly, but no longer as uncertain as before. Its form shimmered at the edges, wavering like mist over water, but there was something steady within the trembling, an unspoken desire not to vanish, not to be unseen. It lingered beneath the moonlight, and in lingering, it chose. The vampire felt that choice settle softly within his chest. He had long been alone in this garden, walking beneath the willows, listening to the water, carrying the weight of endless night. But now, another being stood in the silence with him, not intruding, not demanding, but simply sharing the quiet. The garden seemed to recognize this shift, as though it had been waiting for it. The willows swayed gently, letting their long branches fall like veils around the path where they met. The leaves brushed against the spirit's glow, and instead of bending through empty air, the branches seemed to cradle the light, as though acknowledging it. A breeze stirred, soft as a sigh, and the fragrance of roses drifted between them, wrapping them in a delicate perfume. The vampire raised his eyes, letting them meet the faint glimmers that served as the spirit's gaze. For a moment, time felt less heavy. For a moment, he felt that perhaps the centuries had not been wasted, that perhaps the long solitude had been leading here, to this gentle encounter beneath the silver moon. The spirit tilted its head, its form flickering, but not fading. The gesture was small, barely a ripple in its luminous shape, yet it spoke volumes. It was the tilt of curiosity, the tilt of recognition, the tilt of one being daring to remain present in the face of another's quiet. No words were exchanged, yet the silence was full. It was not the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of two souls who had nothing to prove, nothing to claim, nothing to guard. It was the silence of trust, fragile, new, but real. The vampire moved slowly, raising one hand until it hovered above a cluster of roses. He did not pluck them. He never did. He simply let his hand rest in the air above their glowing petals. The spirit drifted nearer, drawn by the flowers, by their soft fragrance, by the gesture itself. Its glow brightened faintly as it leaned toward the blossoms, as though remembering, as though yearning. The vampire stepped back a little, giving space. He watched as the spirit lingered over the roses, its light mingling with the pale silver of the petals. The flowers seemed to glow brighter, warmed by presence. For the first time, he saw the roses not only as his companions, but as a bridge, something that could be shared, something that could hold the attention of another soul as they had held his. The fountain's rhythm slowed, or seemed to. The water lifted again, each movement calm, unhurried, like breath drawn in sleep. The vampire felt that rhythm echo within him, steadying his thoughts, quieting his old ache. The spirit turned its glimmering face toward him again. Though no words passed, he felt the shape of a question. Who are you? Why do you walk here alone? What is this place that blooms only in silence? He did not answer in words. Instead, He let the garden speak for him. He stepped aside, opening the path that led deeper into the midnight roses. His motion was clear, an invitation. The spirit hesitated, trembling at its edges, but then drifted forward. Together, they moved beneath the arch of silver blossoms, the moon resting its glow upon them both. The path curved past the stream, where starlight shimmered upon the water's surface. The vampire paused, allowing the spirit to hover near the stones, to watch the ripples, to see how the water carried the sky. The spirit leaned closer, its glow reflecting on the ripples, making them gleam as though lit from within. The vampire stood back, his stillness once again his offering. They continued to the fountain. Its carved stone birds gleamed faintly, their wings wet with silver spray. The spirit lingered there, hovering close to the falling water, letting the mist pass through its form. It shimmered brighter for a moment, as though the water had refreshed it, as though even a lost soul could drink peace from the air. The vampire felt a quiet warmth stir in him. He had tended this garden for so long, yet he had never seen it through another's eyes. Now, watching the spirit drift among the roses and water, he saw its beauty anew, not as a refuge for his solitude, but as a gift that could be shared. The moon climbed higher, the stars leaned closer, the silence grew richer, woven now with two presences instead of one. They did not speak. They did not need to. The garden itself had become their language. The silver roses, the soft water, the quiet branches. Each sound, each scent, each shimmer was a sentence written in calm. The vampire turned once more toward the spirit. He inclined his head again, slow, deliberate, a gesture of gratitude. The spirit flickered, as though touched, as though seen, and for the first time since the endless night had begun, the vampire felt not only the weight of solitude, but the soft promise of companionship. The roses swayed, the fountain sighed, the moonlit garden listened, and beneath that listening sky, two silent figures shared their first meeting, unspoken, unbroken, yet deeply understood. The garden lingered in its hush, carrying the stillness of their first meeting like a secret folded into its leaves. The vampire walked beside the spirit now, not close enough to crowd, not far enough to seem apart. Their silence stretched between them, but it was no longer the silence of emptiness. It was shared, like a cloak of calm draped across two shoulders. The spirit drifted along the winding paths, its glow brushing gently against the roses. Each time it passed, the blossoms seemed to lift higher, as though bowing in reverence to the fragile light. The vampire followed with unhurried steps, watching with quiet wonder. He had walked these paths countless times, yet tonight they appeared new. It was as though the garden itself bloomed differently, awakened not only by moonlight but by companionship. The fountain whispered as they approached, its rhythm soft and constant. The spirit hovered over the water, shimmering in the spray. The droplets fell through its form, scattering silver light that seemed to mingle with its glow. The vampire lowered his gaze, letting the image rest in his thoughts. A soul renewed by water that had never renewed him. Something stirred within him, something long hidden, long forgotten. He sat upon the stone bench and closed his eyes. Memory came like drifting petals, faint and gentle, almost weightless. He saw not faces, but gestures, a hand pressing a rose to his chest, a soft laugh in the stillness of twilight, the sound of footsteps beside his own. He remembered warmth once so ordinary, now so rare it felt like dream. These were not sharp memories. They were echoes of forgotten dreams that stirred only now because another soul had dared to linger in his garden. The spirit turned toward him. Though it had no mouth, he thought he felt a question in its silent gaze. What do you see when you close your eyes? What do you carry in your endless night? The vampire did not answer with words. Instead, he lifted one hand, slowly, carefully, and touched the nearest rose. He let his fingers rest on the stem without breaking it, letting the thorns press gently against his skin. The gesture spoke. I remember. I ache. I still choose gentleness. The spirit hovered closer, its glow bent softly around his hand, as though offering comfort. It flickered faintly, and for a moment, he thought he saw an image within its light. A child chasing fireflies, a woman at a window, a figure kneeling in prayer. But the images dissolved before he could be certain. Perhaps they were the spirit's own echoes. Perhaps they were his, mirrored back to him in light. Together, they remained there in silence. The fountain's song wove around them. The roses breathed their perfume, and the moon kept steady watch. For the first time in many lifetimes, the vampire felt the ache of solitude ease. It did not vanish, but it softened. The way frost softens under dawn, the way heavy branches lift in a gentle breeze. He opened his eyes and looked again at the spirit. Its glow was fragile, trembling at the edges, but at its heart there was steadiness, a will to remain, at least for now, a will to be seen. He thought of his own heart, weary but still beating in its quiet way, still willing to hold peace. The two of them, shadow and light, bound not by words but by presence. The willows swayed above, their branches falling like soft curtains around the fountain. The garden felt like a chamber, a sanctuary, where memories could rise without wounding, where dreams could echo without fading. The vampire leaned back against the stone bench. He let his eyes drift upward to the stars. Once, he whispered, though the word was so soft it was barely sound, barely more than breath. The spirit tilted closer, as if listening. Once, I dreamed of walking not alone. The spirit flickered, a shimmer like agreement, like remembrance, like the answering of one echo with another. It did not speak, yet he felt its silence join his own. And in that joining, he felt less alone. The garden deepened in calm. The fountain breathed. The roses glowed. The spirit lingered. The vampire sat with his memories, no longer sharp, no longer cold, but softened into dreams. Dreams he thought had vanished. Dreams returned to him in the presence of a wandering soul. Night passed gently around them, and as the stars drifted westward, the vampire realized something he had not dared to believe. Perhaps solitude was not the only song left to him. Perhaps within the midnight garden, companionship, however fragile, however fleeting, could also bloom. He closed his eyes once more, letting the echoes of forgotten dreams lull him. The spirit hovered nearby, its glow a quiet lantern in the silver air. Together, they rested in silence until the moon leaned lower, and the night itself seemed to whisper, "Not all is lost, not all is lost." The hours slipped deeper into night. The garden held its breath, soft and steady, as though it wished not to disturb the two figures who lingered among the roses. The vampire walked again, this time with the spirit beside him. Not too near, not too far. Their steps, one silent upon the stones, the other drifting without weight, moved in a rhythm that felt like a shared heartbeat. The wind stirred gently, carrying with it the fragrance of moonflowers and roses. It moved through the arches, across the fountain, into the willows, and finally around them both. The vampire closed his eyes as it brushed his face, cool and calming. When he opened them, he saw the spirit glow brighter, its form swaying softly as though it, too, breathed with the wind. They passed beneath the willow trees, their branches swaying like veils. The spirit slipped through them, glowing threads mingling with green shadows. The vampire lingered behind, watching how the leaves seemed to bless the soul with their touch, brushing it without harm, without resistance. He had walked there alone countless times, but tonight, the space felt different, alive, complete. The fountain sang to them when they returned to its circle. Water rose, water fell, endless yet gentle, like time slowed into a lullaby. The vampire sat upon the stone edge, his cloak settling quietly at his feet. The spirit hovered close, drifting toward the spray. Droplets passed through it, scattering light, and for a moment, It seemed almost whole, as though the garden had given it shape. The vampire reached out his hand not to touch, but to let it rest upon the air between them. He offered, not grasping, not demand, only presence. The spirit drifted closer, letting its glow wash faintly over his fingers. It was not contact, yet it was enough. A quiet bond formed there, in that space between. A bond that needed no words. The wind sighed again, circling them gently. It carried their silence into the roses, into the branches, into the night sky. The stars above seemed to tremble in agreement, steady and kind. The vampire lowered his gaze. He felt the weight of centuries, but softer now, as though some of it had been lifted and shared. This wandering soul, fragile as mist, had eased what no time had ever eased. He had thought loneliness unchangeable. Yet here, in the midnight garden, it had bent, softened, made room for something else. The spirit lingered before him, its glow pulsing faintly, steady as breath. Though it did not speak, he felt its presence say, "I see you." And though he did not answer aloud, his silence replied, "I see you too." Together, they listened to the wind. It moved through the roses with a hush like whispered blessings. It stirred the pool until starlight rippled across the water. It slipped over stone and soil and feathered into their hearts. It bound them not with chains, but with gentleness. The vampire lifted his face toward the stars, letting the wind brush across his pale features. "Stay," he whispered, though the word was not command but prayer. The spirit flickered brighter, as if in answer. Not forever, not bound, but here, for this night, for this moment, for this quiet bond beneath the moon. The roses swayed together, the fountain breathed steady, the willows bent low, as though listening. Even the smallest moths seemed to hover nearby, their wings catching the glow of both moonlight and spirit light. The garden held them in its circle of calm, as if it had been waiting all these long years for this companionship to bloom. The vampire felt his heart stir again, not with hunger, not with sorrow, but with tenderness. He had forgotten what it meant to share the night with another presence. He had forgotten how silence could feel lighter when held together. Now, with the spirit near, he remembered not a sharp ache, but a soft comfort. He folded his hands in his lap, leaned back against the stone, and let the quiet bond deepen. The spirit hovered close, shimmering gently, its glow brushing against the edges of his shadow. For a moment, he thought their shapes blended light and dark, sorrow and peace, each softening the other. The wind rose once more, circling the garden like a lullaby. The vampire closed his eyes and breathed it in. When he opened them, the spirit remained, still glowing, still near, and he knew, with a calm certainty, that loneliness had shifted. It had not gone, but it had changed. It had made room for companionship, quiet, fragile, but real. The night continued, slow and silver. The garden listened, and in its listening, it blessed their bond. The night had stretched long and silver, yet it did not feel endless. The vampire walked once more along the winding paths, the spirit drifting at his side. They moved together without haste, as though every step was a quiet vow, as though the garden itself guided their way. The roses leaned toward them. The fountain sighed its endless lullaby. The willow branches swayed gently overhead, veils of green folding and unfolding like the rhythm of breath. The wind was soft, carrying the fragrance of night-blooming flowers, carrying also the calm of their bond. The vampire had not thought such companionship possible. His heart, though it beat with an immortal rhythm, had long been hushed by solitude. Yet now, with the wandering soul beside him, he felt something awaken, not sharp, not sudden, but tender, like the first color of dawn brushing against a dark horizon. He paused beside the pool of starlight. The water mirrored the sky, but tonight its surface glowed brighter. The spirit drifted near, its shimmer bending toward the reflection. Together, they gazed at the mingled stars above and stars below, and in that moment, the vampire felt a truth settle softly within him. Even shadows could hold light, if light dared to enter. The spirit flickered, trembling at its edges, yet its glow held steady at its center. The vampire saw in it not weakness, but courage, to remain when lost, to linger when uncertain, to share silence with another. It was a quiet bravery. He bowed his head, offering respect without words. They walked on, reaching the trellis of roses. The blooms arched above them, silver-tipped and fragrant, bending low as though listening. The vampire lifted one hand and let his fingers brush against a petal. The spirit hovered close, its glow mingling with the flower's pale sheen. For an instant, the rose seemed to shine from within, as if the presence of two lonely beings had become a blessing instead of a burden. The vampire's thoughts wandered gently, as the night often encouraged. He remembered how loneliness had once felt like chains, heavy and unbreakable. Yet now, in the company of this fragile light, loneliness had changed. It was no longer a prison. It was a shadow softened by the presence of another. The dawn waiting beyond shadows was not a sun that burned, but a gentle light that healed. They came once more to the fountain. The water rose, fell, rose again, steady as breath. The vampire sat upon the stone edge. The spirit lingered before him, its glow pulsing faintly with the rhythm of the fountain. He placed his hand on the cool stone, grounding himself in the calm of the moment. The spirit drifted nearer, close enough that its glow brushed against his cloak. He felt no fear, he felt no hunger, only peace. The wind stirred again, circling them both. It carried the hush of the roses, the sigh of the water, the whisper of the willows. It seemed to say what neither could. You are not alone now. The vampire closed his eyes and breathed deeply. When he opened them, he met the spirit's glimmering gaze. No face, no words, and yet understanding. They did not need speech. The silence between them had become its own language, soft and sure. The stars above leaned closer, brighter, as if they too wished to bear witness. The moon, patient and silver, cast its light over the garden in a tender blessing. Time moved forward, as it always did, but tonight it felt kind. The vampire thought of the years he had carried in solitude. He thought of the centuries that had felt like one long night. Now, he realized, even if the dawn never truly came for him, there could be light within the shadow. There could be joy in the silence. There could be companionship, even in the stillness of the grave hours. The spirit shimmered, its glow steady now, as if strengthened by being seen. The vampire felt his heart ease, felt the weight of endless night loosen just a little more. He had not believed peace could be shared, yet here it was, quiet, fragile, beautiful. They sat together as the night drifted toward its close. The wind slowed, the garden rested. The stars dimmed faintly, preparing to yield to dawn. The vampire and the spirit lingered side by side, bound not by time, not by flesh, but by presence. The dawn had not yet come, but he felt it waiting, not as a blaze, but as a promise. A dawn that did not chase away shadows, but softened them. A dawn that could live even in a midnight garden. And as he gazed at the first faint paling of the sky beyond the trellis, the vampire whispered not to the spirit, not to the roses, not even to himself, but to the silence that held them all. Even in shadow, there is light. The spirit glowed brighter, as if answering. And the garden, eternal in its hush, seemed to nod in agreement. The garden was still, as if holding its breath for the last hours of night. The vampire and the spirit lingered at the fountain's edge, the roses swaying gently around them. Above, the sky was dark velvet threaded with countless stars, each one shining steady and calm. The moon had begun to tilt westward, but its silver light still draped the garden, still wrapped them in quiet. The vampire felt the passing of hours, yet he did not mourn them. He had lived through centuries of nights, but this one had been unlike any other. Loneliness had been softened, silence had been shared, and the weight of endless years had grown lighter. He sat in that awareness, as one sits in a gentle chair, unhurried, comforted, willing simply to be. The spirit drifted close, its glow warm, though it gave no heat. Its edges shimmered faintly, as though reminding both of them that nothing lingers forever. Yet in its heart, the light was steady. It had remained through the night, and in remaining, it had given a gift greater than words, presence. The vampire bowed his head, slowly, reverently. He lifted a hand and let it rest upon the stone beside him, palm open, as though offering the night itself his gratitude. The spirit hovered above that hand, not touching, but shining gently over it. In the soft space between shadow and glow, a bond rested unspoken, tender enough. The wind rose once more, circling the garden with the hush of roses and the sigh of leaves. It brushed against the spirit, making its glow shimmer brighter. It touched the vampire's cloak, stirring it like a soft wave. It passed through the fountain's mist, carrying silver droplets into the air, where they sparkled like falling stars. The whole garden seemed to lift in blessing, as though acknowledging what had been born within its midnight walls. The vampire spoke softly, his voice a murmur, hardly louder than the fountain. "May you be at peace." The words were simple, but they carried centuries of weight, centuries of longing, centuries of gentleness he had kept hidden. He had not spoken so tenderly in longer than he could recall. The spirit flickered in reply, its glow pulsing once, twice, as though echoing, "And may you be at peace too." The roses bent their heads, the willows swayed like slow dancers. The stars above seemed to shimmer with brighter calm. All of creation in that quiet place bore witness to their parting blessing. The vampire felt no sorrow, only acceptance. He knew dawn approached. He knew the spirit, fragile as mist, could not linger forever. Yet he also knew that nothing is lost when it is given with gentleness. The bond they had shared would remain in the garden, in the roses, in the hush of water, in the quiet rhythm of the wind. The spirit rose a little higher, its glow widening, softening, until it seemed less like a figure and more like a star descending among the roses. The vampire watched in silence, his heart calm. He knew this was not farewell. Not truly. It was only the nature of gentle things. To come, to bless, to rest for a while, and then to drift where they are most needed. He placed both hands upon his knees and lifted his gaze to the sky. The stars leaned close, as though listening. The moon shed its last silver kindness, and with the spirit's glow mingling among them, he whispered a final blessing, not only for the wandering soul, but for all who might drift through shadow in search of rest. May your night be gentle, may your dreams be soft, may the stars guard you, and may the silence hold you kindly. Sleep in peace, sleep in silver, sleep in quiet joy. The spirit pulsed once more, bright as a final star, and then its glow softened into the air, fading like dew into morning. The vampire lowered his head, closed his eyes, and let the calm settle deep within him. The garden was silent, yet no longer empty. He could feel the presence still woven into roses, into water, into the endless hush of night. The wind stilled, the fountain breathed, the stars lingered, steady and kind, and the vampire sat within the silver garden, cloaked not in solitude, but in peace. He folded his hands, closed his eyes once more, and let himself rest in the blessing he had spoken. The garden whispered around him. The night offered its final lullaby. The stars gave their soft light, and all was calm. All was gentle. All was quiet. A wish lingered in the air, meant for any soul who wandered near, meant for any heart that sought rest. May your sleep be deep. May your dreams be kind. May you wake in peace, and beneath the stars, the garden held that blessing forever.